Before something was even decided, before a single tactical adjustment could be made, before the dust had settled on a scoreline that would define a nation's humiliation, a man was already gone. One game, one World Cup match, one result, and Tunisia had already made history for all the wrong reasons. Think about that for a moment. The 2026 FIFA World Cup, the grandest, most watched sporting event on the planet, expanded for the first time to 48 nations, hosted across 3 countries, carrying the weight of billions of dreams. And Tunisia's chapter began not with a battle cry, but with a funeral. A quiet, ruthless, federation-issued execution of a coach who never saw the bullet coming. Or maybe he did. Maybe that is the most disturbing part of all. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why the sacking of Sabri Lamouchi after one single World Cup game was never about one game. You will understand what was really happening inside that squad, inside that federation, and inside a dressing room that was already fracturing long before the opening whistle in Monterrey. This is the story they do not want cleanly told. Stay with us. If you have been looking for the kind of football coverage that goes beyond the scoreline and into the machinery underneath, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because what we are about to unpack is the kind of story that rewrites how you see the beautiful game entirely. The match itself was a demolition. Sweden, composed and clinical, ran Tunisia ragged in the heat of Estadio BBVA in Monterrey on the opening day of Group C play. 5-1. 5. The Tunisian goal, a late consolation that changed nothing, only underscored how complete the collapse had been. Sweden had not simply won, they had exposed, they had dissected, they had revealed, in 90 minutes of football, every fracture that the Tunisian Football Federation had spent months pretending did not exist. But here is the central contradiction at the heart of this entire story. The Federation did not sack Sabri Lamouchi because Tunisia lost 5-1 to Sweden. They sacked him because they had already decided, long before that match, that their trust in him was gone. The result simply gave them the cover. The scoreline gave them the narrative. What they pulled the trigger on in Monterrey was not a reaction. It was the final move in a sequence of decisions that had been building for months. And that changes everything about how you understand what happened. Pull back from the match itself, and the picture grows considerably darker. Lamouchi had taken charge of the Tunisian national team with a mandate to build something coherent, something competitive, something worthy of a World Cup stage. On paper, the credentials were plausible. Experience in French football, a man who understood the dynamics of managing diaspora-heavy squads with complex identity politics baked into the dressing room, and Tunisia, a nation with genuine footballing talent scattered across European leagues, should have been capable of presenting a challenge. Should have been. What actually unfolded in the months leading to Monterrey told a completely different story. The warm-up matches, the preparation fixtures that are meant to build confidence and cohesion, delivered results that were not simply disappointing, they were alarming. Heavy defeats, thin attacking output, an inability to keep clean sheets against opposition Tunisia should have been managing comfortably. Goals were not being scored, games were being lost. The performances lacked an identifiable structure, lacked energy, lacked the belief that a squad heading to the World Cup ought to carry. And yet, the Federation said nothing publicly. They maintained the arrangement. They kept Lamouchi in place. They traveled to Mexico. They prepared. And then Sweden happened, and suddenly the decision that had been forming in the shadows stepped into the light. Reports surfacing in the hours after the match described an atmosphere in the Tunisian camp that had been toxic for weeks. Not in the days after Sweden, weeks before. Player unrest is the polite term used in press releases and federation statements, when what is actually meant is something closer to open revolt. Established players with significant European experience have reportedly grown frustrated with the coaching approach, with tactical decisions that seem disconnected from the realities of the squad's strengths, with a communication style that generated friction rather than unity. Sit with that for a moment. You have a squad of professional footballers representing their country on the biggest stage in the world. A stage that comes around once every 4 years. A stage that, for many of them, represents the absolute pinnacle of everything they have worked towards since childhood. And the environment inside that camp, in the weeks leading to their opening game, was fractured. The dressing room was not together. The trust between players and coach had eroded to a point of no return before a ball had even been kicked in competition. This is what 5-1 really means. It is not a scoreline. It is a symptom. It is the visible external expression of an internal collapse that had been progressing quietly, invisibly, beneath the surface of every press conference and every training session photo released to the public. Tunisia did not lose to Sweden because Sweden was simply better on the day. Tunisia lost to Sweden because they arrived in Monterrey as a broken unit wearing the same shirt. And the Federation knew it. That is the part that cannot be dismissed. Before we go any deeper into what happens next, if this kind of investigative football journalism is what you have been looking for, the kind that actually asks why instead of simply reporting what, subscribe now and turn on notifications. What is coming in the second half of this story involves a name that carries enormous weight in world football, a rescue mission under impossible pressure, and a question about whether any manager on earth could salvage what Tunisia has already lost. You will not want to miss it. The Tunisian Football Federation has a history, a documented, consistent, unmistakable history of ruthless managerial turnover. This is not speculation. This is pattern. Earlier in the same calendar year, before the World Cup had even begun, the Federation had already replaced coaching staff in a sequence of decisions that would have been destabilizing for any national program. Tunisia has not been building toward this World Cup with patience and continuity. They had been cycling through men, discarding them when results disappoint or when internal politics demand a sacrifice. Lamouchi was not the beginning of this pattern. He was the latest iteration of it. And the speed with which the Federation acted after the Sweden match, the immediate, almost pre-prepared nature of the dismissal, suggests that the machinery for this decision had been assembled well before full time in Monterrey. You do not sack a World Cup manager within hours of a single opening match result unless the groundwork has already been laid. You do not already have a replacement identified and available unless conversations have already happened. Because that is exactly what emerged. Hervé Renard. The name carries a particular resonance in the history of World Cup upsets. Renard is the Frenchman who orchestrated one of the most stunning results in tournament history when he guided Saudi Arabia to a victory over Lionel Messi's Argentina in Qatar in 2022. A result so improbable, so complete in its execution, so perfectly constructed in its tactical intelligence, that it rewrote assumptions about what supposedly weaker nations could achieve on the grandest stage. Renard knows how to organize a defense. Renard knows how to build belief in a squad that has been told it cannot compete. Renard knows, perhaps better than almost anyone in international management, how to prepare a team for a game they are expected to lose. Tunisia needed exactly that. But here is where the hope runs directly into the wall of reality. Renard has been handed a squad mid-tournament, a squad that has already been defeated, a squad already carrying the psychological weight of a 5-1 humiliation in their opening match, a squad that was reportedly fractured before that match even occurred. The dynamics of a dressing room do not reset simply because a new name appears on the training ground whiteboard. Trust, cohesion, and collective belief are not installed overnight by a famous appointment, and the fixtures that remain offer no mercy whatsoever. Japan, the Netherlands. These are not opponents that reward disorganization or reward internal chaos. Japan arrives at this World Cup as one of the most tactically sophisticated national teams on the planet, a side that has spent years building an identity and a system that functions with remarkable collective discipline. They press with intelligence, they transition with speed, they punish teams that are not mentally present and structurally sound. Against a Tunisia that is still processing a managerial change, still adapting to a new coach's demands, still carrying the ghost of Monterrey, Japan represents a test of almost brutal difficulty. The Netherlands present a different but equally severe problem. Dutch football has rediscovered its identity in recent years, blending technical quality with physical presence and a directness that gives opponents no time to settle. They are not a side you can ask a compromised Tunisia to simply contain and survive. They demand answers to questions that require preparation, clarity, and confidence, all three of which Tunisia is now desperately short of. Renard must somehow, in the compressed time frame between matches, establish authority in a dressing room that rejected his predecessor. He must identify which players he can trust, which tactical approach gives this squad the best chance of extracting something from two ferociously difficult matches. He must manage the psychology of players who arrived at a World Cup with hopes and are now staring at potential elimination with a single result on the board. He must do all of this while the entire football world watches, evaluates, and judges every decision he makes. The margin for error is not slim, it is non-existent. And yet, if anyone understands what it means to walk into an impossible situation and manufacture belief from nothing, it is Hervé Renard. The Saudi Arabia victory over Argentina was not an accident. It was the product of meticulous preparation, psychological mastery, and a tactical structure built around the specific vulnerabilities of a specific opponent. Renard does not walk into situations like this and surrender. He calculates. He organizes. He finds the edge. Whether that edge exists for Tunisia in this World Cup is the question that nobody can honestly answer right now. Because what happened in Monterrey was not simply a football result. What happened in Monterrey was the public exposure of a national football infrastructure under severe strain. A federation that makes decisions in reactive, panicked cycles rather than with structural vision. A squad that was never properly unified around a shared identity. A coaching appointment that arrived without the necessary foundation of trust. And a World Cup campaign that was, in many respects, compromised before it truly began. The story of Sabri Lamouchi is not the story of a bad manager destroyed by a single result. It may not even be the story of a bad manager at all. It is the story of a man placed in an environment where failure was the structural outcome, where the relationships were wrong, the preparation was wrong, the results were already wrong, and who then became the visible face of a collapse that had many authors and many architects. Football has always been extraordinarily efficient at finding a singular human being to carry collective blame. The coach walks. The federation remains. The federation that made the appointment remains. The federation that did not address the player unrest remains. The federation that presided over the disastrous preparation results remains. And tomorrow, the federation that pulled the trigger in Monterrey will watch Hervé Renard lead Tunisia onto a pitch and hope that a famous name can clean up the mess that an institution created. That is the real story here. Not a 5-1 defeat. Not one man's dismissal. The real story is what it reveals about who makes decisions in Tunisian football, how they make them, and what those decisions cost the players who dedicate their lives to wearing that shirt. What do you think? Can Hervé Renard rescue this campaign, or has too much already been lost in Monterrey? And more than that, is the problem Lamouchi, or is the problem the federation that keeps striking the match and wondering why there is always fire? Tell us in the comments. This is the conversation worth having. If this is the kind of football storytelling you have been searching for, the kind that holds nothing back and goes where the real questions live, like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The 2026 World Cup has only just begun, and if Tunisia's opening chapter is any indication, the stories waiting in the weeks ahead are going to be unlike anything this tournament has ever produced. Because history was made in Monterrey, just not the kind anyone wanted. The first manager ever dismissed after a single World Cup match. The first casualty of a tournament that had not even found its rhythm. The first victim of a World Cup that had only just begun. The first. But perhaps not the last.